When my grandfather left me his mountain cabin in his will, I thought it was the greatest gift of my life, until my own family turned against me, demanding I sell it for quick cash. They called me selfish and greedy. Little did they know I had other plans entirely. My name is Parker, and I need to tell you about the man who changed my life, my grandfather. While my parents were busy climbing corporate ladders in their glass towers, I was 8 years old, standing on a rickety wooden dock, learning to cast my first fishing line into the mirror-like surface of Mountain Lake. Grandpa's weathered hands guided mine, his calloused fingers teaching me patience in a world that had forgotten what it meant to wait for anything. Every summer from age 8 to 18, I'd escape to that magical place, a cabin that time forgot, nestled deep in the Cascade Mountains. While my sister practiced piano for her recitals and my brother practiced for his advanced placement tests, I was learning something far more valuable. Grandpa taught me to read the grain of wood like others read books, to understand that every tree had a story to tell through its rings and patterns. He showed me how to use tools that had belonged to his father and his father before him. Tools that carved more than just wood. They carved character into a young man's soul. The cabin itself was a testament to old-world craftsmanship. Built in 1945 with his own hands, every beam, every joint, every carved detail held a memory. Grandpa would point to a particular notch in the kitchen doorframe and tell me about the bear that tried to break in during the winter of '72. The hand-carved banister bore the scars of 3 generations of grandchildren sliding down it, each mark a reminder of laughter that echoed through those wooden halls. But it wasn't just woodworking. Grandpa taught me to fish at dawn when the mist still danced on the water. He showed me how to read weather patterns in the movement of clouds, how to start a fire with wet wood, how to find peace in silence. While my family saw these as quaint novelties, temporary vacation skills, I felt something deeper stirring inside me. This wasn't just visiting. This was coming home to a part of myself I didn't even know existed. As I grew older, the divide between my world and my family's became more pronounced. They lived for quarterly earnings reports and social media likes. I lived for the satisfaction of creating something with my hands, something real and lasting. They saw my love for craftsmanship as a phase, a rebellious response to their success. They couldn't understand why their son chose sawdust over stock options, why I preferred the honesty of wood grain to the politics of office life. Then came that January morning when the call shattered my world. Grandpa had passed peacefully in his sleep, leaving behind an empire of memories and a legal document that would tear my family apart. The will was simple. The cabin and its 5 acres of pristine mountain land were mine. Not my parents', not split among the siblings, but mine alone. The lawyer's words felt like both the greatest gift and the heaviest burden I'd ever received. Standing in that sterile office, holding the deed to the only place that had ever truly felt like home, I couldn't have imagined the war that was about to begin. My family looked at those papers and saw dollar signs. I looked at them and saw Grandpa's legacy, the sacred trust he'd placed in my hands. But that trust was about to be tested in ways I never thought possible, in ways that would force me to choose between blood and belief, between financial security and something far more precious, my soul. The attack began within days of Grandpa's funeral. I was still processing grief, still trying to wrap my head around the fact that I'd never hear his laugh again when my phone started buzzing with calls from real estate agents. Not calls I'd made. Calls my mother had arranged behind my back. She'd taken it upon herself to get appraisals without telling me, treating my inheritance like a family asset to be liquidated. "Parker, we need to talk." Mom's voice was ice cold when she finally called me herself. "The cabin is worth more than we thought. There's a resort development going in just 2 miles away. The land alone is appraised at $450,000. Her tone suggested this should excite me. Instead, I felt sick. The family meeting they called felt like a tribunal. Sitting around my parents' pristine dining table, I watched my own flesh and blood transform into sharks circling wounded prey. My sister Emma spoke first, her voice shaking with what I initially thought was grief, but soon realized was greed. "I need this money, Parker. My wedding is in 6 months, and James lost his job. We've already put deposits down on everything." My brother Marcus leaned forward like a corporate predator. "I've got investors lined up for my tech startup. This money could change everything. We could all be set for life." He slid a folder across the table filled with investment projections and profit margins, as if Grandpa's legacy could be reduced to a PowerPoint presentation. Dad, who'd barely spoken to Grandpa in years, had the audacity to play the wisdom card. "Son, your grandfather was practical above all else. He'd want us to make the smart financial decision here. You're young, you'll have other opportunities to buy property." I felt my hands clenching into fists under the table. This isn't just property, it's home. It's everything Grandpa worked for, everything he taught me. "Oh, please!" Emma's voice cracked like a whip. "You spent a few summers there as a kid. Don't act like you're some mountain man. You live in an apartment complex and work construction. Be realistic." That's when I snapped. "Realistic? You want to know what's realistic? None of you visited him in the last 5 years. You were too busy with your careers and your social lives to spend one weekend with the man who raised me." The slap came out of nowhere. Mom's hand connected with my cheek so hard it echoed through the room. The silence that followed was deafening. Her face was twisted with rage I'd never seen before. "How dare you? How dare you guilt us over this? We all loved your grandfather." I stood up slowly, tasting blood where I'd bitten my tongue. "If you loved him, you'd understand why he left it to me. Not us. Me." I pulled the will from my jacket and slammed it on the table. Because he knew I was the only one who actually gave a damn about what it meant to him. Marcus jumped up, his chair crashing backward. "You selfish bastard. You think you're better than us? You think working with your hands makes you more worthy?" He grabbed my shirt and shoved me against the wall. For a moment, I saw pure hatred in my brother's eyes. Hatred I'd never imagined could exist between family. I pushed him back, hard. He stumbled and knocked over Mom's china cabinet. The crash of breaking dishes felt like our family shattering along with them. "Get your hands off me. I'm not selling. End of discussion." But it wasn't the end. Over the next weeks, the psychological warfare intensified. They'd call at all hours, sometimes together, sometimes individually, wearing me down with emotional manipulation. Emma cried on voicemail about losing her dream wedding. Marcus sent texts filled with accusations of being a traitor to the family. Mom stopped speaking to me entirely, but I'd hear through mutual friends how she was telling everyone I was being unreasonably selfish. The final betrayal came when I found out they'd consulted lawyers about contesting the will. My own father had called Grandpa's attorney, fishing for any technicality that might invalidate my inheritance. When I confronted him, he didn't even have the decency to deny it. "We're your family," he said coldly. "Blood is thicker than water." I looked at this man who'd raised me, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped with homework, and I realized I didn't recognize him anymore. "Wrong, Dad. Grandpa taught me the full quote. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds you choose are stronger than the bonds you're born with." Standing in my apartment that night, staring at the deed to the cabin, I made a decision that would change everything. They wanted me to sell Grandpa's legacy? They thought I was being impractical and naive? Fine. I'd show them exactly how practical I could be. I'd show them what that worthless cabin was really worth. But first, I had to do something that terrified me more than any family confrontation. I had to leave everything I'd ever known behind and trust that Grandpa had seen something in me that I hadn't yet discovered in myself. 3 days later, I loaded everything I owned into my beat-up pickup truck. My landlord thought I was insane when I broke my lease. My boss at the construction company shook his head when I quit my steady job. "You're throwing your life away for a shack in the woods," he said. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. But as I drove up that winding mountain road, leaving cell phone service and civilization behind, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. The cabin looked worse than I remembered. 2 winters without maintenance had taken their toll. The front porch sagged like a broken promise. Windows were cracked, and the roof had more holes than a conspiracy theory. The mice had claimed the kitchen, and I'm pretty sure a family of raccoons had been using the living room as their personal playground. Standing there in the fading daylight, with 40 degrees and snow in the forecast, I wondered if my family was right. Maybe I was completely out of my mind. But then I found them. Grandpa's journals, tucked away in a waterproof box beneath a loose floorboard in his bedroom. Page after page of his handwriting, documenting not just the cabin's construction, but the dreams he'd built into every beam. I learned things about my grandfather I'd never known. How he'd saved for 3 years to buy this land. How he'd hauled every single board up that mountain by hand because there was no road. How my grandmother had cried the first time she saw their future home, not from disappointment, but from pure joy. Most importantly, I found the entry from the day I was born. Today, my grandson Parker came into this world. I see something special in him already. This place will be his someday. I can feel it in my bones. He's going to need it, and it's going to need him. That first winter nearly broke me. November brought snow that didn't stop for weeks. The ancient heating system failed, leaving me to heat the cabin with the old wood stove while I learned plumbing and electrical work through YouTube videos and trial and error. My hands cracked and bled from the cold. I lost 15 pounds because getting to town for supplies meant a treacherous 4-mile hike when the road became impassable. But something incredible happened in that isolation. Without the constant noise of city life, without the pressure of family expectations, I began to hear myself think for the first time in years. Every morning I'd wake up with purpose. Repair the roof, install new insulation, restore the original hardwood floors that had been hidden under decades of cheap linoleum. I wasn't just fixing a building, I was fixing myself. The physical work was meditation. As I stripped layers of paint from the original hand-carved trim, I uncovered details Grandpa had put there. Tiny wildflowers carved into door frames, his initials intertwined with my grandmother's in the corner of the mantel. Each discovery felt like a message from beyond. Confirmation that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. By spring, something magical had happened. The cabin that my family had dismissed as worthless was transforming into something extraordinary. Every repair I made enhanced the original character rather than covering it up. I'd learned to work with the natural materials, respecting what Grandpa had built while bringing it into the modern world. Solar panels powered LED lights that illuminated the restored log walls. New windows frame views that took my breath away every morning. I documented everything on social media, partly to prove to myself that this was really happening, partly because I was proud of what I was accomplishing with my own hands. Comments started pouring in from strangers who were moved by the story of preserving family legacy. Architecture blogs picked up the photos. Someone called it the most beautiful cabin restoration they'd ever seen. But the real transformation wasn't in the building. It was in me. The angry, resentful man who'd fled his family's greed was disappearing, replaced by someone who understood what Grandpa had been trying to teach me all along. Success wasn't measured in bank balances or quarterly reports. It was measured in the satisfaction of a job well done, in the peace that comes from living in harmony with nature, in the knowledge that you're creating something that will last long after you're gone. By the time September arrived and the first of the autumn colors painted the mountains, I wasn't just living in Grandpa's cabin anymore. I was living his dream, but making it my own. I'd spent a year learning what it meant to be truly self-sufficient, truly content. I'd found purpose in preservation, joy in simplicity, and strength in solitude. I had no idea that my family was watching. I had no idea that my year of exile was about to come to an end in a way that would prove everything Grandpa had believed about what truly matters in life. The universe has a sense of humor. Just as the autumn leaves reached their peak and my cabin graced the cover of Mountain Living magazine, 3 cars pulled up my newly graveled driveway. My entire family had come calling, but this time they weren't here to demand I sell. They were here to see what their greed had cost them. I watched through my restored bay window as they stepped out of their luxury vehicles, their designer shoes crunching on the wooden walkway I'd built by hand. Mom stopped mid-step, her mouth literally falling open. Emma grabbed Marcus's arm, pointing at details she was seeing for the first time. Dad just stood there, slowly shaking his head in what looked like disbelief. I let them knock. I let them call my name. I let them stand on that hand-carved porch for a full minute before I opened the door, coffee mug in hand, looking every bit the mountain man they'd once mocked. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Parker," Mom's voice was barely a whisper. We saw the magazine. We saw the article about what you've done here." I leaned against the doorframe, not inviting them in. "Did you now?" Funny, I didn't see any congratulations texts. Emma shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. Marcus, for once in his life, seemed to have nothing to say. "Son, can we come in? We need to talk." Dad's corporate authority had evaporated. He stood there like a man who'd just realized he'd sold Amazon stock in 1997. I stepped aside, watching their faces as they entered what they'd once called a worthless shack. The hand-hewn beams gleamed under carefully placed lighting. The stone fireplace I'd restored dominated the room, with Grandpa's original woodworking tools arranged as art above the mantel. Every surface told a story of craftsmanship and love. Emma touched the restored banister, running her fingers along the same carved details she'd dismissed. This is beautiful, Parker. I had no idea you could what? Actually accomplish something meaningful?" The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. "You all made it pretty clear what you thought I was capable of." The dining table I'd crafted from a fallen oak on the property showcased my laptop, displaying messages from architectural firms wanting to feature my work, from guests wanting to book stays, from documentary filmmakers wanting to tell my story. Numbers on the screen showed booking revenues that already exceeded what they'd wanted from selling the land. Marcus picked up a printed email. "Cabin Retreats, Unlimited, wants to offer you a franchise deal. They're valuing your concept at, Jesus, Parker, $2 million? Turns out there's a market for authentic experiences," I said, refilling my coffee. City people are desperate to disconnect, to learn traditional skills, to remember what matters. I've got bookings solid through next year for wilderness retreats, woodworking workshops, digital detox experiences. Mom sank into one of Grandpa's original chairs, which I'd lovingly restored. She picked up his journal from the coffee table, the one where he'd written about me being born. Her eyes filled with tears as she read his words about seeing my potential. "He saw something in you that we—" She started, then stopped, unable to finish. That you what? That you were too blinded by dollar signs to see? I sat across from her, feeling 13 months of hurt rising to the surface. You know what the real irony is? I'm making more money now than your precious land sale would have given us. But more importantly, I'm happy. I'm doing what I love, what I was meant to do, something you never bothered to understand. Emma burst into tears. We almost destroyed this. We almost made you destroy Grandpa's legacy for my wedding money. God, Parker, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. Marcus looked around the cabin with new eyes. You did this yourself? All of it? The plumbing, the electrical, the carpentry? Every nail, every board, every connection, just like Grandpa taught me. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the lake. You know what I realized out here? Grandpa didn't leave me this place because he thought I needed money. He left it to me because he knew I needed purpose. He knew I needed to remember who I was underneath all the noise of your expectations. Dad appeared beside me at the window, his reflection showing a man who looked older than his years. We failed you, son. We failed him. We let greed poison our grief, and we almost cost you, cost all of us, something irreplaceable. Almost? I turned to face him. Dad, you slapped me. Marcus shoved me into a wall. You tried to contest Grandpa's will behind my back. You didn't almost destroy our family, you did destroy it. The question is, what are we going to do about it now? What happened next surprised me. One by one, they began to apologize. Not the performative apologies of people trying to get back into your good graces, but real, raw acknowledgments of how their greed had blinded them to what truly mattered. Mom cried as she told me how she'd watched my social media posts, seeing not just the cabin's transformation, but mine, realizing what they'd driven me away from and toward. Emma canceled her extravagant wedding plans and had a simple ceremony the following summer, at the cabin, surrounded by the beauty Grandpa had preserved and I had restored. Marcus visited every month, learning woodworking from his big brother, saying he needed to remember how to create things instead of just consuming them. But the real victory wasn't the apologies or the reconciliation. It was standing on that porch I'd rebuilt with my own hands, watching my future children play in the same lake where Grandpa had taught me to fish, knowing that this legacy would continue. I'd learned the lesson Grandpa had been trying to teach me all along. The most valuable things in life can't be sold. They can only be preserved, nurtured, and passed down. Some things aren't meant to be cashed in. Some things are meant to be home. My name is Parker, and my family wanted me to sell my grandfather's cabin. So I moved in, restored it myself, and learned what he'd been trying to teach me my whole life. That true wealth isn't measured in your bank account. It's measured in the satisfaction of work well done, the peace that comes from living your values, and the knowledge that you're building something that will outlast you. I kept the cabin, but more importantly, the cabin kept me.